We finally have the Xbox Series X in the studio, and unlike a new iPhone, you don't get a next-gen console every year. It's only once in a while, so this one is special. On the front of the box, you can see that you get 4K gaming at up to 120 frames per second, along with a 1TB SSD. Over on the side of the box, they've listed some of the other key features like 8K HDR, variable refresh rates, and the 4K Blu-ray player. On the back of the box, you just have a few other highlights, with the big one to me at least being the backwards compatibility with your older titles, including the Halo Master Chief Collection, which if you watched any of our battery tests, you may have noticed the Halo theme that we have running throughout. But here's the moment you've been waiting for, and you've got to admire that presentation. The console itself is wrapped up just like a gift or something, and we'll unwrap that gift in a second, but first let's take everything out of the box, where you have a power cable, an HDMI cable, the controller, which we'll take a deeper look at in a second, and then your quick start guide and your typical documentation. This power cable is all you'll need to power the Xbox, so there's no giant power brick like there was before. The HDMI cable also isn't your typical cable. This one is ultra high speed, which is what allows for features like 4K at 120 FPS. Of course, that's if your TV supports it with an HDMI 2.1 port. And then there's the controller, which really isn't all that different from the last generation, although there are some subtle improvements. The D-pad got an upgrade overall. I'd say the biggest improvement I can notice is when pressing diagonally, it feels like its own separate button instead of just a combo. And there's now a share button in the center of the controller where a single press takes a screenshot, while pressing and holding on that button creates a screen recording. On the bottom of the controller, you have the same headphone jack and accessory port as before. On the top, what's new is there's finally a USB-C port instead of the dated micro USB. And then on the back, Microsoft interestingly decided to stick with the same setup for the batteries. Now, the advantage here is if you have backup batteries, you can swap them out instantly with effectively zero downtime. It's kind of the same idea as when phones had replaceable batteries back in the day, but unlike those old phones, the downside here is Microsoft didn't include a rechargeable battery pack. They only include 2 non-rechargeable Duracells, so if you want a rechargeable battery pack, it'll cost you somewhere around $25. And then last thing on the controller is it now has a textured material both on the back and on the triggers, which in general makes everything just a little bit grippier. Moving on to the console itself, considering the type of power this thing is packing, it's actually smaller than I was expecting it to be. This is thanks to the split board design that Microsoft went with, where the cooling happens up and through the console and out of the big concave vent at the top. This vent has a green subsurface layer that gives you this illusion that the Xbox is being lit up when you look at it from an angle. On the front, you have the Xbox logo, which doubles as the power button. There's a disc tray and then a single USB port with a sync button. The thing I like about the front is the disc tray has only one button next to it for eject, which prevents any kind of confusion, and because the disc tray is on the left side, if you set the console sideways, the disc tray is on the top, which isn't the case on the PS5. Also, the right side has rubber feet on it, so you can set it down without needing any sort of accessory. On the back of the console is where you have the rest of your ports. There's 2 USB Type-A ports, an Ethernet port, the power port, HDMI out, and an expansion slot where you can upgrade the storage without losing those fast SSD speeds. An interesting detail I noticed is there are these little dots next to each of the ports on the back, with each one having its own unique design. I'm guessing that the idea here is if you can't easily access the back of your Xbox, you can still feel around for them for which port is where. On the left side of the Xbox, there's just some branding, and at the bottom, you have a non-removable built-in stand that also has a little "Hello from Seattle" text in it, which is a nice touch. So overall, it's nothing flashy, but I like the look of it, especially when you consider that the console is small enough to fit in most people's entertainment stands without needing any sort of adjustments. But if the Xbox isn't your thing, there's always the bigger and more flashy PS5, which we'll be unboxing next on the channel. So be sure to subscribe if you don't want to miss out on that unboxing. Of course, we also have more iPhone 12 mini and iPhone 12 Pro Max coverage coming soon, with most of our laboratory tests almost complete.